Hello, and a very warm welcome to Sapporo Gakuen University's Community College Global Issues in English. And today's topic is World Health. Before we start, I recommend that you visit this page where you will be able to find some vocabulary support and some language exercises which will help you with the topic. All right, let's begin. In 2019, 59.4 million people died all around the world, and 141 million people were born. We can see from our population studies that this gap will get smaller and smaller, but this was the situation in 2019. And some people died of communicable diseases, and some people died of non-communicable diseases. And these are some categories of each disease. The communicable diseases on the left, sometimes called infectious diseases, and the non-communicable on the right, which are non-infectious. I have included Japanese in this slide. I usually try to avoid Japanese, but because this is a very complicated issue, I have put Japanese in this side. So in communicable diseases, we can see influenza, diarrheal diseases, especially cholera, colds, tuberculosis, pneumonia, malaria, of course, carried by mosquitoes, plague, HIV, AIDS, and smallpox. Smallpox I have put in red because smallpox has completely disappeared from the world. International cooperation and vaccinations means that smallpox no longer exists anywhere in the world. It's a great success for international cooperation. On the right side, we see non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancers, strokes, COPD, again very complicated, but connected to breathing, and then Alzheimer's and dementia and diabetes. Now here's a quiz question for you. Which do you think caused most deaths in 2019? Do you think communicable diseases or non-communicable diseases? The answer is non-communicable diseases. And quiz number 2, what percent of deaths are caused by non-communicable diseases, do you think? Do you think it's about 61%, about 71%, or about 81%? The answer is about 71%. Over 41 million people died of non-communicable diseases. Now, this was not always the case. If we look back in history, we see that pandemics, such as we have with the problems today, pandemics were hugely the greatest cause of death and were very, very scary for many, many years, way back here. The Justinian plague in 542, coming forward, the Black Death in Europe in the 14th century, Smallpox epidemic, a huge smallpox epidemic, killing many, many people. This was a cholera plague, a pandemic of cholera in India. This big one is the very famous, the Spanish influenza of 100 years ago, causing many, many deaths around the world. And down here is HIV AIDS, again, a very, very dangerous disease, and infectious or communicable diseases. And down here we have the new corona disease, COVID-19, still not finished, but we can see the size is very, very small. So in the history of the world, pandemics, communicable diseases were much more dangerous. We have an example from quite recent news in Osaka. Quite recently they found these remains of 1,500 people. Most of them were young, and they died in an epidemic in the 1800s. So we can see all over the world pandemics caused great number of deaths. Now, if we look at deaths today, between the year 2000 and the year 2016, there have been some changes. We can see more red here than here, so a change from the blue, which are non-communicable diseases, away from the red, which are communicable diseases. We can see in both categories, heart disease and stroke were the leading causes of death 20 years ago and now, but we can see that many of the Communicable diseases such as cholera, tuberculosis, AIDS were very, very common 20 years ago, but not so common now. We can also see differences between rich countries and medium income countries. We can see again more red countries, communicable diseases in the poorer countries, and more blue in the richer countries. The green, by the way, is traffic accidents, which is in the top 10 or top 12 of causes of death. And when we look at the richest countries and the poorest countries, we see even more dramatic evidence of the pattern of diseases between the richer and poorer countries. So in the poorest countries, a lot of red, a lot of communicable diseases. In the richer countries, only one red, a lot of non-communicable diseases in the richer countries. And if we look at these, we can see breathing problems, cholera, HIV, AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis. And I want to look particularly at these two, because these two are a combination and they are connected with mothers and babies. Having a baby in some parts of the world is still dangerous. For mothers, now we can see 295,000 mothers died in 2017. That's 810 people every day. Most of them in sub-Saharan Africa, 196,000. Some in Southern Asia, 58,000. And 94% of the deaths are in low-income countries. Now in Japan, having a baby we think of as quite a low-risk activity. In some parts of the world, it is still a very dangerous thing. And even worse news is for babies. 5.2 million children under the age of 5 died in 2019. This is very, very shocking. Of these 502 million, 204 million babies died in the first 1 month of their life. So very young babies in great danger in these countries. And 75% of these babies died in the first year of their life. Now, some people can say that that terrible, terrible information is good news, and in some ways it is, because if we look at this, we can see the number of deaths in Africa between mothers and babies is going down and down and down. So it is quite good news, and we can see here child deaths have decreased from 12.5 million people in 1990 to 5.2 million in 2018. Maternal deaths, mothers' deaths, have decreased from 451,000 in 2000 to 295,000 in 2017. This is very clearly a result of international cooperation, especially the Millennium Development Goals, followed by the Sustainable Development Goals, bringing these numbers down. They are still terribly, terribly high. These deaths are preventable, but at least we are moving in a good direction. We can see the numbers of deaths caused by communicable diseases. Influenza, still a dangerous disease, 250,000 people, 500,000 people every year. So that's a very high number. However, when we think about the Spanish flu 100 years ago, 50 million to 100 million, huge, huge number. In Japan, in the Spanish flu, 257,000 people died in Japan in 1918 to 1920. When we compared to COVID-19 now, just 1 million people, again a terrible, terrible disease, but very little compared to 100 years ago. Other diseases, diarrheal diseases, now this again is cholera, particularly 1.6 million people, tuberculosis, 1.5 million people, pneumonia, 2.56 million people, but again, very terrible thing, 800,000 of these were children. Malaria, of course, carried by mosquitoes, 405,000, but 272,000 of those were children. Now, we do have very good news about malaria. The numbers here are coming down and down. About 10 years ago, malaria deaths was about 1 million, so now it's less than half of that, mainly thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who are doing a lot of work in this area. And also HIV AIDS, this is a terrible number, 690,000, but it's going down and down. So little by little, communicable diseases are being defeated. Non-communicable diseases, we can see heart attacks, strokes for the head, COPD for the lungs, cancer, lung cancer is the most dangerous type of cancer by a big margin, and then diabetes and Alzheimer's and dementia also causing a lot of deaths. Now we can see that medical technology, international cooperation can defeat communicable diseases, but what about non-communicable diseases? Now here is a hint. Many of them are connected to our lifestyles. And here's a quiz question for you. What is this machine? Looks a very strange machine, doesn't it? Here's a hint. It was invented in 1884 in Durham, North Carolina. And on the right there is another hint. I don't know if you can see it. I will tell you what it says. It says it is responsible for the deaths of millions and millions of people. What do you think that is? The answer is it is a machine for mass producing cigarettes. Before that machine, cigarettes were made by hand. They had to be rolled, and so very few were produced. After that machine, cigarettes were produced by the thousands and millions every year. And the result, according to the WHO, tobacco kills more than 8 million people each year, kills 1 million people in China every year. More than 7 million of those deaths are the result of direct tobacco use, while about 1.2 million are the result of non-smokers being exposed to second-hand smoke, passive smokers. And 87% of lung cancer deaths are caused by smoking. The remaining 13% of lung cancer deaths are caused by pollution in the air and pollution in the home fires burning in the house. 25% of cardiovascular deaths, heart attacks, are related to smoking. 80% of COPD deaths are caused by smoking. Plus, of course, smokers are more likely to suffer from many other diseases, including COVID-19. Another problem in richer countries and non-communicable diseases is connected to being overweight or obese. And as we've seen in other lectures, overweight adults, 1.9 billion in the world, including obese adults, 312 million in the world. Overweight and obese children, 155 million in the world. And being overweight or obese is the cause of various diseases, such as heart disease, high blood pressure, and especially diabetes. And we can see the rate of diabetes is increasing from the year 2000. It's going up and up and up. And then by the year 2030, it will be 578 million. In the year 2045, 700 million. So we can see diabetes is becoming more and more dangerous. Very shocking information about diabetes. We can see in the world there's going to be a 51% increase in diabetes. We can see increases here, 31%, 15%, 74%, 96%, 143%. So these are people in future who will become diabetic and will suffer from this particular disease. And we can see again, world diabetes cases expected to jump by 55% by the year 2035. And we can see in Pacific, Asia, Europe, in every country, the number of diabetic patients is going to increase. And the top 10 countries by number of people with diabetes in 2013 is here, and Japan is here, 7.2 million people with diabetes living in Japan. Very, very serious diseases. But we can see again in China and India, very big jumps. And remember, these are not the richest countries in the world. These are the not so rich countries, but even they have diseases of the rich countries. Another problem, of course, is Alzheimer's and dementia. And again, we can see a huge jump in the number of cases going up, especially in low and middle income countries from now, but also in high income countries. We can see by 2050, again, very, very serious problem. And this, of course, is a disease that is terrible for the sufferers, but also terrible for the families and the carers and the people who need to take care of people with Alzheimer's. A great medical challenge. And here we can see again dementia and Alzheimer's. Japan is the second country. We can see about 2% of the people in Japan now have diabetes, now have Alzheimer's. However, this is going to jump up. This is the figure for 2035, and we can see Japan will be the worst case in the world, with over 3.5% of its population suffering from Alzheimer's. So again, huge, huge challenges for our medical staff. And what about the future? Well, we have amazing medical technology, we have vaccines, we have new treatments for cancers, things like genetic engineering, stem cell technology, amazing, amazing technologies. We have AI and personalized medicine for each person, and of course international cooperation, which got rid of smallpox and is also getting rid of polio as well, by the way. But more non-communicable diseases in low-income countries, cancers, especially lung cancers from smoking, in poorer countries that have less strict controls over smoking, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and of course we should never forget another pandemic will come at some time in the future. So in conclusion, we're all very curious about how I will die. How will I die? We don't know, we cannot control where and when and how we die, but it's probably a better question to ask not how will I die, but until that time, how shall I live? And if we live a creative and happy life, then that is probably the best answer we can hope for. Thank you for watching. See you again.